We are going to continue with our discussion of the unwholesome chittas. We're going to start with we're going to hopefully finish the last unwholesome chitta, number 12, chitta number 12, the Mohamuna delusion rooted chitta associated with restlessness. We're going to look at that chitta. Now, we've already talked about restlessness before when we talked about the 4 unwholesome chittasikas. These are mental factors that arise in every unwholesome chitta. So in all 12 of the unwholesome chittas, you will have delusion, shamelessness, fearlessness of wrongdoing, and restlessness. And you may remember a few months ago, when I talked about them, I gave them labels. I gave them names of dark, dirty, dangerous, and distracted to help remember what they do to the mind. And so restlessness or distracted is actually an element of all 12, arises in all 12 unwholesome chittas. Whenever there is an unwholesome state of mind, there is always some degree of restlessness. All 12 unwholesome chittas include restlessness because the unwholesome mind is always unsettled and unable to stay steady on the object. It is the inherent agitation or shaking that makes every unwholesome mind fundamentally unstable and unable to find true peace. Since restlessness or agitation is present in every unwholesome chitta, no unwholesome state is ever truly settled or at ease. They always carry an inherent instability, however subtle it might be. So here, actually, this is a duplicate of a slide that I shared a few months ago about restlessness arising in all 12 of the unwholesome chittas. In Vipassana, this means that even subtle agitation must be noticed as it prevents stable, continuous mindfulness. The discipline of moment-to-moment precise noting provides an anchor that settles this scattered energy, allowing the mind to remain fixed on the arising and passing of phenomena. A yogi can use this directly. So any experience or felt quality of unsettledness, agitation, or inability to rest in the present moment, that's a clear sign, that's a reliable signal that an unwholesome chitta is operating, making that very restlessness a legitimate and important object to note, rather than a distraction to push aside. Yogis often, when they experience restlessness, say, oh, this is bad, I want to get rid of this, don't want this. Actually, observing restlessness can be very useful, very powerful for the Vipassana yogi. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. Now, restlessness, as we mentioned earlier, doesn't arise alone. It arises together with shamelessness, fearlessness of wrongdoing, and delusion. They all support and interact with each other. Let's start with how do the others support restlessness? The shamelessness, ahirika, is a attitude of it doesn't matter, no conscience, lack of conscience. Now, without moral self-restraint, the mind drifts aimlessly. So without the mind having conscience or moral restraint, the mind, it's very easy to drift away from the object. Fearlessness of wrongdoing, dirty, this is where the mind doesn't care about karma, doesn't care about the results of karma. So this disregard of consequences, it fuels restlessness. It makes restlessness more stronger. Delusion, operating in the background, it leaves the mind without a clear understanding or stable foundation. And that allows restlessness to arise more easily. Restlessness itself influences the other three universal unwholesome factors. Restlessness weakens moral self-awareness. Conscience is difficult for conscience to arise when the mind is not settled itself. It also weakens reflections on consequences. If the mind is agitated, it's not going to be thinking about the effects of karma. It also scatters attention, sustaining delusion. So if the mind isn't able to settle on the object, then that gives delusion a chance to grow. So what's the difference between restlessness in all the other 12 chittas and restlessness in chitta number 12? In the delusion-rooted chitta, accompanied by restlessness, chitta number 12, restlessness is the main active, unwholesome force. So in other words, it's at the front of the stage. If you think about it as watching a play, it's the main actor in the movie. In the other 11 chittas, restlessness is a supporting actor, kind of in the background. So in the other unwholesome chittas, restlessness is in a secondary supporting factor that supports greed, hatred, or doubt. The main thing it supports is the root of greed or hatred, and in chitta number 11, it supports doubt. So in attachment-rooted chittas, the lobha-mula chittas, restlessness intensifies mental involvement with the desired object, prevents the mind from letting go, and creates excitement and agitation. Basically, the mind gets excited and says, "Oh, that's interesting." When the mind is saying, "Oh, that's interesting," that excitement, that agitation is a mixture. That excitement is a mixture of attachment and restlessness. In aversion-rooted chittas, restlessness contributes to the mental agitation, repeated angry thoughts, difficulty calming down, impulsive reactions. I mean, I think we've all had that experience when we're upset or angry about something. The mind takes a while to to let it go. And it's restlessness that keeps it coming back in agitation. The chitta associated with doubt, restlessness makes the wavering, the uncertainty associated with doubt even worse. So there's the uncertainty of doubt and the restlessness of not even being able to settle on the current object. So they amplify each other. Okay, let's zero in on this chitta specifically. It is unprompted, spontaneous, it's always spontaneous, and it's always accompanied by a neutral feeling. The neutral feeling is indicated here by the neutral face here, not a happy face like in some of the attachment rooted, not unhappy face as in the aversion rooted. It is a neutral feeling. Unprompted. Why is a chitta then where restlessness is predominant got a neutral feeling or spontaneous? Rather, why is it spontaneous? Delusion is inherently weak and dull, so it never needs an external trigger or deliberate inducement to arise. You can't push it into arising like you can with attachment or aversion, because it's like jelly. You can't push jelly. Both delusion-rooted chittas, including the ones associated with restlessness, are always classed as unprompted or spontaneous. By its nature, it's the absence of settled attention. It scatters before any directed intentional effort can take hold. So if there is inducement, it's not associated with restlessness. It's attachment rooted or aversion rooted. Why has it got a neutral feeling? Delusion is weak, dull, unclear state of mind, lacking the intensity needed to produce a pleasant or unpleasant feeling. Restlessness doesn't change this. And since it's present in all unwholesome chittas, without adding any feeling to them. It doesn't settle clearly. It's suspended, hurried, and unresolved. So this unsettled quality is shown in the neutral feeling. Now, restlessness is not ordinary mental activity or healthy alertness. We need to contrast those because sometimes the mind is very alert and moving from one object to the next. This can be healthy. This is not restlessness. Restlessness is an agitated scattering of attention that prevents the mind from settling on a single object. It's the mind that cannot rest, cannot remain, and keeps slipping away from one object to another without settling. So in this citta, delusion obscures the true nature of reality, while restlessness is experienced as the mind's inability to remain composed and gathered on a single object. The opposite of restlessness is tranquility. Tranquility is when the mind is, to use a modern phrase, at one. You're just settling back into the moment. You're at one with the current situation. That's the sense of tranquility, related to concentration, but a little bit different. Concentration is about focus. Focus can be wholesome or unwholesome. Tranquility, that sense of being calmly settled back into the moment, is always wholesome. So restlessness is scattered, no settling. Tranquility, when the mind is settling back into the moment, it's settled, it's gathered, it's composed, tranquil, soft. Restlessness is ungrounded. Tranquility is calm and composed. Restlessness is rooted in delusion. Tranquility is rooted in calm and mindfulness. Restlessness leads to agitation. Tranquility leads to composure. So we've got two opposite ends of the spectrum here. There's a mind that just cannot settle, and the mind the tranquil mind that just settles into the moment. Restlessness scatters the mind among many objects, while tranquility settles and gathers the mind upon its object. It's different from concentration. Concentration is taking all the mental faculties and zeroing them in on the object. It's different from the settling. The settling is the tranquility, the calmness is the tranquility, the focus is the concentration. The Pali term uddhacca for restlessness has two aspects to it. Ud, which is the prefix indicating a rising or bursting upward. The mind is lifted away from stability. And Dutch, which means shaking or tossing, stirring, or disturbing. So when you put them together, it gives you the idea of restlessness or uddhacca. It doesn't just mean thinking about many things. All right, thinking about many things can be wholesome. It is restlessness is the subtle inability of the mind to stay with the present object. So even when gross distraction, even when the mind is not running all over the place, a slight trembling or instability of attention may still be present. The mind can still be just a little bit agitated, a little bit vibrating. Then this is a sign of restlessness. Going into the Visuddhimagga, the definition is in 4 areas. The characteristic of disquiet, like water whipped by the wind. The function is instability. Manifestation, how it is experienced, is turmoil and scattering of the mind. The proximate cause, what conditions it to arise, what happens that causes restlessness, is unwise attention to mental disquiet. Now we see the term unwise attention, Ahimsa Mansikara, coming up all the time. What is the proximate cause of delusion? What causes delusion? Unwise attention. What causes attachment? Unwise attention. What causes aversion? Unwise attention. So this unwise attention is behind the scenes causing all of the major unwholesome chittasikas to arise. It's the main driver. So in the case of restlessness, it's unwise attention related to mental disquiet. So the proximate cause is the turning of the mind in a way that stirs and scatters it, inviting haste, check-in, constant movement, rather than wise attention that gathers and settles the mind. So the manasikara, or attention, is turning the mind. Okay, ayoniso means unwise. So turning the mind in an unwise way leads to restlessness and the unwholesome roots. Restlessness is strengthened by unwise attention that reaches for the next object before the present one has been fully known. And restlessness is weakened when each object is allowed to be known completely before the mind moves on. So instead of resting with what is present, the mind begins anticipating what comes next, rehearsing, planning, chasing ahead. And when this happens, the present object is abandoned before it is clearly seen. So for the meditator, when the mind is restless, the mind does not penetrate, doesn't have time to go into with panya or penetrative understanding into the current object. It's always going to the next object. It's always going into the next experience. And so that pulls the mind out of the current experience. Now, as concentration deepens, the mind becomes less compelled to move ahead of what is actually arising. So one-pointedness works against restlessness. Different facets of restlessness, it's like scattered ashes blowing around in the wind, moving around everywhere. It's present in all unwholesome chittas. It's a hindrance, it's a fetter, and it can actually target the Dhamma itself. When we get to the, and we'll talk about this a little bit more detail later, but when we get to the insight, versions of insight, that's actually restlessness behind it. It's opposed by tranquility, arises even when externally the mind seems to be calm. There can still be restlessness. Even when the yogi appears to be calm, there can still be a very restless mind inside. I have personally experienced this. So I was on a retreat, and I was doing a interview with another yogi. Now that other yogi, he sat beside me in the meditation hall, and I was so impressed by this guy. He was like a statue, just solid. And I thought, wow, his practice must be really good. But when I listened to the interview, his mind was all over the place, right? So don't get fooled by what appears to be calm. It's not that, it doesn't necessarily show what's going on in the mind. On the other hand, when somebody's fidgeting all the time, yeah, you can be pretty sure it's pretty mind. So the problem is not the object itself. It's not what is the mind is taking as its object. It's the inability to stay with it long enough for clarity to happen. A yogi with persistent restlessness cannot settle into the continuity of mindfulness. Remember, you need mindfulness, but you need continuous mindfulness. Restlessness attacks that continuous aspect of it. So you can be mindful for 1 second, but then the next second, that mindfulness falls away, and that ruins your progress. So that hinders your progress. The mind keeps slipping from the primary object or to whatever arises next. As a hindrance, now the hindrances are the things that stop the mind from unifying, composing, from good concentration developing. And restlessness is one of the hindrances. So as a hindrance, a blocking of concentration Restlessness prevents the mind from concentrating, keeping it from entering steady calm, because attention is perpetually drawn elsewhere. It acts as a fetter. A fetter are those factors which keep us bound to samsara, keep us having continuous rebirth. Restlessness acts as a fetter by binding the mind to a subtle agitation that persists long after the grosser, unwholesome states have been abandoned. So even when the attachment or aversion have been abandoned, there is this subtle residual, which is restlessness, that continues it on and keeps us bound to samsara. The sotapanna completely uproots doubt, but not restlessness. Restlessness is only fully uprooted at the path of arahantship. In other words, it's extremely difficult to get rid of because it can be so subtle as a habit. The anagami, just before the arahat, free of sensual desire and ill will, they still experience the subtle scattering of restlessness. It's only the arahat's mind that's fully settled. So in the mind of an anagami, there is no attachment to sense objects, tastes, smells, physical sensations, sights. There's no attachment to those. But there's no aversion to any, no aversion has been completely uprooted. The only thing that there is continuing on is attachment to continued existence. All right, and restlessness still has an opportunity. The habit of restlessness still can show up in the mind of an anagami, even though the only attachment they have in their mind is that very, very subtle desire to continue on for jhana, with saying, okay, I want to be in a jhana, I want this jhana to continue. That is a restless mind when it's thinking, I want this jhana to continue. It doesn't pick and choose an object the way attachment or doubt does, or aversion. It scatters whatever object happens to be present. For example, during the corruptions of insight, vipassana pakiyasa, it can target the Dhamma itself. So, person is meditating, bright light comes up. That experience of the bright light, or a sense of serene calm, or understanding. Many of these strong experiences come up. They trigger a habit of restlessness. Oh, I want this. Oh, this is great. There's a agitation, unwholesome agitation, triggered even by the unwholesome states. And this is why, those are wholesome reactions of the mind. And that's why when the corruptions of insight arise, the meditation teacher's advice will be, just keep noting. Just keep noting. Forget about the bright light, just keep noting. You didn't experience Nibbana because there is this, many yogis, because it is so extraordinary from what they've ever experienced before. This bright light is something that they've never seen anything that could even remotely describe it, or this sense of calm, or this sense of understanding. These experiences are so unusual, so visceral, and they're gut-wrenchingly different. They start to think, hey, am I starting to glimpse Nibbana? And this is restlessness at work here. All right. And so the teachers know about this. They know what's going to happen. They know when it's going to happen. They can roughly guess when it's going to happen. And their advice will be, just keep noting. Just keep noting. Because it arises with no fixed object, restlessness can intrude on any moment, including moments that look outwardly calm and composed. So my fellow yogi who was meditating like a statue, he looked calm and composed. But the mind, a different story. Restlessness is like a monkey in a tree that cannot stay on one branch. It leaps around from branch to branch, touching nothing long enough to know it well. Just doesn't hold on to anything long enough to know it well. The tree is there, the branches exist, but the monkey never rests. Restlessness is not the absence of freedom. It's the inability to remain with the path. There's no settling back into the moment. Another analogy is like a pool of water whipped up by the wind. The surface ripples and churns, never lying still long enough to hold a clear reflection. No single image can form upon it, only fragments, broken, shifting. The characteristic is named in the text, a disquiet that will not settle. So a scattered mind, like a wind-churned water, cannot clearly know what passes before it. And this, in the suttas, the Buddha gave analogy of water, seeing a reflection in water for the various hindrances. And for restlessness, it was like whipped up by the wind. You can get muddy water, which is delusion. You can get boiling water, which is attachment, and so on. All of these different things that can happen to water, the skim on the water. So without all of these things that can relate to blocking the concentration. As another analogy, restlessness is like a banner caught in the wind. Every gust pulls it in a different way. It's always moving. The banner is not torn or damaged. It simply cannot hold one position while the wind is blowing. Until the wind ceases, the banner cannot rest. Restlessness is the mind's inability to remain in one posture of attention, however brief the gust. Now, restlessness is now an epidemic. Modern life bombards the mind with entertainment, advertisements, notifications, social media, news, and endless choices. Now, this morning, I got here a little bit early, and so I sat in the car and I checked with AI. Any studies about attention span, how it's changed? Okay? Very interesting. Before 1900, when it was mainly a farming society or scholars, they estimate that attention span was about 45 minutes. Okay? Now, going back even further, at the time of the Buddha, where there are no books, right? Everything was oral teaching. I gotta believe, there's no records, of course, of what attention span was, but I gotta believe it was far longer than 45 minutes. But even before 1900, when there were books, a lot of books around, but when people were mainly farming and studying books, attention span was 45 minutes. In the 1950s and 1960s, it went down to 20 minutes because of TV and radio. All right. And I remember as a child, TV and radio, that really absorbed attention. And you got stuck to the half-hour TV shows, right? And so everything got stuck to 20 minutes. By the 1980s, with music videos, it had gone down from 20 minutes down to 9 minutes. Attention span, they measured it at 9 minutes. 2000, Microsoft did a study, 2000, 12 seconds. All right, this is when you got the internet, right? 12 seconds. 2015 goes from 12 seconds down to 8 seconds. Now, 3 to 5 seconds with TikTok and those things. Now, when I was a kid, 20-minute attention span down to 3 seconds today. How does that change the society?
What does this happen with 3 seconds? What's the implication?
That's right.
What is happening? How do people
The mind cannot stay on one subject for more than 3 seconds because, particularly the young ones, because of the TikTok, right? It's no longer, when I was growing up, it was TV shows, right? Half-hour TV shows. That's what grabbed my attention. So that's why, and before there was TV or radio, so there was nothing to change, I mean, to distract you. And so people had a 45-minute, they estimate 45-minute, and kind of the Buddha much longer. But once music videos start to become a major thing, 9 minutes, once internet, surfing the web, 20 seconds, 12 seconds, then moving to with all the social media, right? 2015, the difference between 2000 and 2015 is social media, right? With all the Facebook and so on. And then even social media, the messages have become shorter and shorter and shorter. And so now to get people's attention, the young people's attention is 3 to 5 seconds, they estimate.
1, 2, 3.
Their attention will shift, but they can't hold. It's hard to believe from somebody who came from 20 minutes watching a TV show to 5 seconds. But because they're just zipping through all these, and
we operate with 3-second attention. We operate.
they don't, nothing is deep. Everything is superficial. Superficial. Everything is superficial. And okay, another example. I was just noticing it as I was driving down here. Billboards used to be static. Now they're constantly changing, right? That's just the last few years that billboards have become animated, right? And so there's so many things they're drawing. They're drawing advertising, notifications, social media, news, endless choices. It's just grabbing your attention. This is the environment in which we live. This is the society in which we live. And what it is doing is training the mind to only stay for a very short time, not to penetrate deeply, not to deeply experience.
If you all knew what would be your future implication.
Oh. Okay, clearly the mind is unable to settle, right? And so rather than deeply penetrating into a topic, it's superficial. And AI is another, it's just accelerating the whole process again, right? 20 years ago, if I wanted to know the effects of restlessness, or attention span, I would have had to go and search online for a long time, all sorts of different, read all these different articles and bring all the material together. Now, click, 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 and in a few seconds, I have an answer from AI. Based on research, right? So it's becoming easier. How much do I really understand this subject? Not very much at all, right? Because all I know about it is just click, click, click. And so I took the easy path rather than the hard path of really learning the subject, because all I wanted to do was just make a comment about it in a Dhamma talk. That's fine. But the problem is, my sister is a teacher, right? And she's saying now the stuff she gets back is all AI generated. Then what can she do? Right? So how is education going to change? And this is something very fundamental that society is having to deal with, is how is education, but how are we going to train people with such short attention spans? You ask any experienced teacher, and they'll tell you, compared to 10 years ago, attention span is much, much shorter now among their students of the same year and so on. They don't have the data to back it all up. They'll tell you the personal experiences is that it's gotten shorter and shorter, and it will continue to get shorter. Now, even during periods of rest, many people feel compelled to check their phone. Oh, that message from AI told me the average adult checks their phone 58 times a day. 58 times a day. And I believe it. I believe it, right? So they browse the internet, occupy themselves with some activity. Silence and stillness often become uncomfortable. I mean, I was having dinner with a group of Buddhist friends last night and talking about going on retreat. And the guy I was talking with, he meditates every morning, but he said, I don't think I could take a full, a month retreat. A month without their phone, without a book, without writing anything down. So uncomfortable. It was scary for them. And silence, stillness. Now, this is the problem. For spiritual development, you need silence and stillness. But people feel uncomfortable with it. Attention is frequently divided among multiple tasks. Multitasking is supposed to be a good thing, or you're getting more done. It's tough on the brain. Conversations and streams of information, weakening concentration, encourages superficial engagement rather than careful observation. Actually, I was reading this study. I track this AI stuff, and so I read or listen to videos about AI. And one of the things that they were saying is, all this AI coming, what effect is it having in the workforce? Well, you think it makes people more productive. Well, yes. But there's now a feeling of, I've got so much power, I can do so much more. And so they put the pressure on themselves. And so there is much greater sense of burnout among the high AI users. You'd think less, now you've got AI, you got more spare time, less stress. Actually, the reality of studies have shown that in businesses today and workers today that are using AI, there's this feeling in their hearts that they should be doing so much more. Nobody's putting it on top of them, but they should be doing so much more because they've got this super powerful tool in your pocket. And the stress level of workers has gone up. That's not even counting will my job be here in 5 years kind of stress. So stress level has gone up because of AI and constant new information. And if you're watching this AI stuff, it's changing almost daily. There's a new model or a new feature or whatever coming out. And you feel like, oh, I gotta keep up on it, gotta keep up on it. So stressful. Things weren't like that when we were kids. Yeah. Things weren't like that. But, okay, that's work, that's daily life. For spiritual development, the idea of going offline, sitting down for a month is actually scary to so many people. And there'll be fewer people willing to make that kind of commitment. But you need that kind of commitment to develop yourself spiritually in meditation. So meditation is going to get tougher and tougher. This is a headwind against meditation. Restlessness is becoming an epidemic. It's now an epidemic. So in daily life, restlessness arises as the inability to sit still or remain in one task for long. Compulsive checking of phones, messages, notifications, racing thoughts that move from worry to worry without pause, talking quickly or interrupting, unable to wait, starting many projects, finishing few. This is restlessness, and I think we can see that this is more and more common now.
Looks like me.
Looks like you. You're not the only restless one. No, this is the environment that the mind is growing up in. Right?
No, you are very low patient. So I feel that talking to you or interrupting because you take a patient level, that doesn't get your mindset.
So imagine you're sitting, meditating. You say, when's that insight gonna come? Right? Because the mind is trained because of his daily life. The Buddha had it easy at his time because all the people around him were, they had much longer attention span. And you need that. Yeah.
In this case, I believe that the trained mind through meditation will be able to overcome all these factors which have been listed, like able to train the mind in a way that, when the mind starts to think about something because of the training and meditation, they put it back and they become themselves. And each time it happens, it will become like a habit. And eventually this will not affect them so much because of the training mind.
I will give you my experience. During a retreat, a month or a 3-month retreat, the mind settles, becomes very calm. Day 1, after a 3-month retreat, right? Day 1 after the retreat, it's still quite calm. Day 2, by day 3, the old habits are starting to come back. Okay, so this is constant inundation. Okay, it's happening constantly. Yes, I believe from my own personal experience, not just I believe, my own personal experience has been that meditating, it takes 3 days, maybe now 5 days for the mind to clear out all the garbage at the beginning of a retreat. But the habit, the restlessness in our society has been going on. It's years worth of accumulated habit. 3 months doesn't clear it away entirely. It can, for a short time, lessen it, but that long-term habit of many years.
So in this case, can I say that if a person has done enough meditation and have made certain breakthrough, this wouldn't affect them so much?
Okay. Even in my opinion, even if one has made breakthroughs, insight knowledges up to Sankopakanya, right on me, all the way up there, not yet Sotapanna, but really high experiences. The habits are still so damn strong. The insight knowledges are not going to, for a long time. For a short time, yes, but for a long time, the habits still, the accumulated habits are still going to win. Of course, once there are breakthroughs of Sotapanna and higher path knowledges, those are completely uprooting. But before that, it's temporary suppression. Temporary suppression. Even the highest insight knowledges before Sotapanna, the Magapala. So, because this is day in, day out, decades of experience building up this habit. And it's all around us and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
What do you need to do to get rid of this worse and worse condition?
Okay. How do we deal with it?
Yeah.
Excellent question. How do we deal with it?
It becomes worse and worse, and then it's effective.
Okay. I'll come to that
Or
in a couple more slides. So we talked about it in daily life, in meditation. I think starting with A, just a few more minutes, then stop, how long to the bell, maybe complete posture again. What should I know next? Each thought pulls the attention further from the arising and falling of the abdomen, never settling into stillness, always in. Restlessness prevents the mind from settling into direct observation. Now, during the first few days that we've been passing the retreat, mind is often restless. It's the mind and body. It's not just the mind, by the way, it's the body as well that has to settle into retreat mode. Because the body has to get rid of the tiredness, the agitation. The settling back into the moment takes a few days. The best strategy is to, during that time in a retreat, Gently, continuously note whatever is most obvious in the present moment without trying to control or stop the restlessness. Don't try to stop the restlessness. That's more an aversion. It's going to create more restlessness. Just say, okay, that's the way the mind is right now. When the mind is restless, simply recognize restless, restless. Note the changing sensation in the body and the mind as they arise and pass away. Observe the effect of this restlessness on the body and the mind, the fidgeting. Observe the mental distractedness. With steady, patient noting and right effort, restlessness gradually becomes clearer as an object and begins to lose its power to disturb the mind. So, observation is the key. That's the way you fight restlessness, is observing it. Noting restless, does three things. It names the mental event as an object. So it's no longer getting caught up in whatever the mind is restless about. It's just noting the mind as the object. It interrupts the scattering before the mind is carried into a chain of further thought. Because with restlessness, one thought triggers another. And so by focusing on the mind, you're not going to get sucked into that whirlpool. It replaces the delusion rooted to restlessness with a wholesome notation. The yogi must not chase the content of the mind as scattered toward. What was that sound? The scattering itself is the object, not its content. So during a retreat, no handphone, no reading, no taking notes. Reading or taking notes on Dhamma still causes restlessness. You know, I notice people during a retreat, during the Dhamma talk, they have a a few of them have paper and pen. That's not good. That is not good. It's more important. Came here to practice, not to study. You should be not, because when you have a paper and a pen during a Dhamma talk, during a retreat, the mind is always about what words should I write down and how does it, the mind becomes, it naturally triggers restlessness. You go to a Dhamma talk at a Buddhist center, yeah. Take notes, that's fine, that's great. But during a retreat, the purpose is to settle the mind. Resist the urge to indulge in making plans, daydreaming, speculating, and analyzing. To counter the energy associated with restlessness, use slower, more precise labeling and noting. With restlessness, one may need to drop labeling to reduce energy and settle into the object. Don't even give it a name, just be aware of the object. Restlessness, okay, we know that there's the 5 faculties of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and panya, penetrative understanding. We need to balance energy and concentration. Too much energy leads to restlessness. Too much concentration can lead to sloth and torpor, laziness of the mind, and dullness of the mind. So the faculties of energy and concentration need to be strengthened together and kept in balance using mindfulness. Excessive energy leads to restlessness, while excessive concentration leads to sloth and torpor. When restlessness dominates the mind, there's excessive effort. I remember saying in an interview to the teacher, I feel like I'm chasing my breath, my rising mind, chasing it. And the teacher said, that chasing mind, it's tense, it's rigid. That's a sign that energy has overshot its mark. Too much effort. Adjust to a calmer effort. A yogi often thinks more effort is good. More effort is only good when it's coupled together with stronger concentration. More effort without corresponding stronger concentration just leads to a more restless mind. When practicing Dhammavipassana, one can observe the mind of restlessness using an observing citta. And when that happens, there is the experience. I've done this, I've watched when the mind is restless, take a step back, zoom out and say, what does that restless mind feel like? And it feels like it's like the consciousness of the chitta, not settled, but it's just hovering above the object. It's like watching, there's the object, and then the mind is, the noting mind is hovering above it, vibrating above it, not settling into it. That's the restless mind. The observing mind is wholesome, going like a reporter, like a scientist, taking down data, going, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So the recommendation from the sutras and commentaries: guard the sense door, reduce unnecessary stimulation, keep life simple and orderly, association with mature set of companions, spiritual friendship, paramita, suitable, calming conversation. Don't get into arguments. I'm going to come back to this sutta late in a moment, but here is something that I think might be useful. Is an acronym, radical. Take a radical approach. R, recognize. Recognize that the mind is restless right now. If you don't recognize it, you've lost the battle. You can't. You've lost the battle right away. You've lost the war. You've lost the battle. The first one is just being aware. Oh, the mind is restless right now. Accept it. Don't fight it. Just so, okay, that's the way it is right now. If you resist it, if you indulge it, that is, now indulging is not the same as accepting. Accepting is just being aware of it. It's not getting into it. It's not indulging in it. It's not resisting and saying, oh, that's bad. I don't want restlessness. So recognize, accept, depersonalize. It's not my restlessness. It's not me who is restless. Restlessness has arisen because of conditions and other factors. Investigate. I gave you the example of what is the experience of a restless mind like. It's like the chitta, the mind, the consciousness and the cetasika are like hovering over the object. So investigate. CA, contemplate anicca, going, look, this is temporary, it's momentary. Or contemplate anatta, this is out of control, this arises because of conditions. And then L, let go. Just, okay. The mind is different, that was it. So if you ask what to do, this doesn't have to be just during a retreat. This can be done during daily life. Press the pause button and recognize what the mind is doing. Right? The mind is restless right now. Accept it. Okay. The mind is.
I'm going to share the proper practice do not react. When the thought arises,
Yes.
you react to it, it goes into mental formation. You start to think that this apple is sweet color, this apple is very tasty, this apple is very sweet. It goes into mental formation. Why does it go into mental formation? Because you choose to react. So if you do not choose to react, there is no more thought. Because gradually the process is you are training the mind not to attach to anything.
The concern I have with what you have just said is you choose not to react. Who is this you who is choosing? It's not, it's habits. All right. There is no choice in this there is no self who is choosing. Yes, you are correct. It is critical not to react, to simply recognize, accept, depersonalize means it's not mine, it's just it exists. Don't deny that the mind is restless. The mind is restless. That's the way it is. I'm not going to indulge in it. I'm not going to try to push it away. When you are saying choose not to react, this is aversion. This is creating a mind with aversion to the current state. And that's going to come back and bite you. That aversion that you have created, that has been created to the mind is misbehaving. that aversion of, that's not the way I want it to be. I want it to be something else. This is reinforcing a habit of aversion. What needs to happen is reinforcing a habit of clear seeing, of seeing impermanence, seeing non-control, seeing non-self. So this is the habit that needs to be encouraged, not trying to get rid of it. If there is a mind that is wholesome, that is clearly seeing, it cannot coexist with a restless mind. It's like there are two. I remember an experience I had. I was meditating and the mind was very tired. Observing that tired mind. So there was a tired mind, and then there was the observing mind that was not tired, it was just watching this tired mind. And I talked to the teacher, I said, it fell. I know from my Abhidhamma it's only one mind. But it was like alternating back and forth, tired mind, observing mind, tired mind, observing mind. And the teacher said, whichever one you feed will get stronger. If there's
reacting part, that's why.
it's not okay. The where there is energy, okay, a little bit different wording here, where energy is applied. If the energy is if the attention is on the observing mind, this cultivates wisdom that nourishes the wisdom, and the tiredness weakens. So the purpose here is not to weaken the tiredness or weaken the restlessness. The purpose here is to nourish the strong. As long as what we're doing is not nourishing aversion, not trying to push it away, not trying to reject the current situation. If you're rejecting the current situation, if there is rejection of the current situation, if there is non-acceptance of the current state, then this is swapping one unwholesome state with another. The other that you're swapping it for is aversion. You don't want to have aversion to the mind. Aversion to the mind is just more aversion. It is important to feed energy, attention to wisdom, penetrative wisdom in the depersonalizing, investigating, understanding the Nietzsche aspect of the impermanence and the non-self character of whatever is there. So it's similar to what you were saying, yes, with a little bit of a twist, with no rejection, no pushing away. It is acceptance of, yeah, the mind's restless right now. That's the way it is. That's the nature of the mind. That's the habit of the mind, is restlessness. I'm accepting. There is a pure acceptance. You need to have acceptance so that because otherwise, if there's rejection, non-acceptance, then that's a mind with aversion. Wisdom, observation through wisdom, strengthening the habit of understanding and wisdom will naturally displace any unwholesome aspect of the mind. It's similar, very similar to what you've said, with a little bit of a twist. Yeah, all right.
Back to the fundamental.
Yeah.
Is or are the conditions that arise, make restlessness arise.
Okay.
I would say the habit of the mind. Now, what are the conditions that makes
Okay.
it become restless?
If we remember the proximate cause, those are the conditioning factors that lead to it, right? The proximate cause of restlessness is unwise attention to sources of restlessness, to disturbing. So it is not, yes, seeing things in the wrong way, not seeing things in the lens of the Dharma. Okay. So yeah.
Usually that I say the moment you recognize it, it's actually your reducing the restlessness because you're already aware of it. The moment you're aware of it,
Absolutely.
yeah, like the moment you're aware of it, you saw like, oh, you got an anchor, yeah, then you accept, like you accept it, then you reduce it.
I agree with you. Recognizing is a first step.
Yeah.
It's like a magician doing a trick, right? If you know exactly how the magician does the trick, you recognize how the magician does the trick, they're not gonna be able to fool you when they do it. You can be impressed by their skill, but you can go, yeah, I know how they did that. So recognizing is the first step, because if you don't recognize, the magician's gonna pull the do the magic and you'll just spin off. Recognizing is the first thing. We can
you very fast, you recognize it, and then you're
you put you shine a bright light on it. And you'll notice in the suttas, there's this character Mara, right? Who is really a personification of all the defilements, including restlessness. And there's a whole series of suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Bhikkhuni Bhaga, where a chapter on bhikkhunis, where the bhikkhuni will be meditating and Mara will come and put a thought in the bhikkhuni's mind to try and distract them or try and stop their meditation. The bhikkhuni would say, I know you, you're Mara. And once Mara is recognized, he said he loses his power and fades away. So recognizing is critical. Loses power. Accepting, not rejecting, not pushing away, not trying to move away from restlessness, just say, yeah, restlessness is the next one. Depersonalizing, saying it exists, it's not me. It exists as a force, as a habit. It's a habit, it's not me. I am not restlessness. I am not restless. Restlessness is a habit. Investigating. Peeling back, looking more clearly, then looking at it from an aspect, from the perspective of anicca or anatta, contemplating it from the perspective of anicca or anatta, is another way of strengthening the wisdom factor, the kindness factor, and then letting go. And even if the next moment is also restless. Okay, so each of these steps, one by one, weakens restlessness without opposing restlessness. It's revealing restlessness rather than opposing restlessness.
To recognize restlessness, is it possible to reduce the number of restlessness arising before recognize means it actually happen? Is there a way?
Okay, the more often, in daily life.
Yeah,
right?
daily life.
In daily life, the more often that there is the pushing of the pause button and taking a radical approach. Now, I'm not talking about a Nietzsche from a Vipassana point of view, or anatta I'm talking about more in a conventional way, right? Impermanence, non-self. But just the more often that the pause button is pushed and the process, going through this process, it shines a light on what's going on. The magician can't work with the light shone on him, right? The magician has a hard time when the spotlight is focusing on, he can't play his tricks. And so it will naturally weaken the habit. So when you were asking about what is the way to deal with it, I was kind of rushing through to get to the radical.
To minimize the occurrence of recklessness.
Yeah, but
in the daily life, how
Okay.
can we? I mean,
when the mind is more when the habit of understanding is stronger, the habit of restlessness will naturally be weaker because it's who gets fed. If you feed the wisdom more often, restlessness is getting starved, will get starved. Okay? Yeah.
Recognize that that particular thought is Mara.
Okay. Look, how to recognize if a thought is a defilement. Look. By the way, Mara is very tricky. Incredibly tricky. He plays so many games. What the Buddhists talked about is loba dosa moha, right? It's pretty easy to spot loba and dosa. All right, attachment or aversion. Is this a thought? Is this a thought rooted in attachment or detachment? Is this a thought rooted in aversion or loving kindness? Is this a thought rooted in mental blindness or illumination and penetration? What is this thought? Which of these six categories, where does it fit in these categories? If it is clear, by the way, Mara can put on a disguise and pretend to be in the wholesome category when he's really not. Don't let him fool you, okay? But look carefully. Is there attachment, aversion, mental blindness behind this? Or is there detachment, generosity, loving kindness, compassion, non-aversion, non-cruelty? Or is there penetrative understanding, wisdom, insight? If there, which bucket does it fall into? That will help you know whether it's Mara, but always be aware that Mara is great at putting on disguises. All right. Why are restlessness and remorse grouped as one hindrance when they are distinct cetasikas? They're grouped together because they disturb the mind in the same way, same general way. Although they are distinct in the Abhidhamma, in the suttas, they work the same. They're grouped together in the suttas. They agitate the mind, prevent concentration. So restlessness scatters the mind among present objects. Remorse returns from past unwholesome actions or neglected wholesome actions. Since both obstruct calmness and collectedness, the suttas treat them together as a single hindrance. So it's really the Abhidhamma approach versus the sutta approach. If you're looking at it from a obstructing concentration, one-pointedness, and then the suttas group them together. However, the Abhidhamma puts them under a little bit of a magnifying glass and says a mind that is got restlessness kind of hovers above. The restlessness makes the mind hover above the object. A mind with remorse pulls back, regret pulls back from the thought. So they feel different. How does restlessness arising as a corruption of insight differ from restlessness met in early practice? I mentioned earlier about the lights, so on. That is restlessness, but it's very different from when you first go on a retreat and try to sit and the mind is running here and there and all the mental garbage. Early in the practice, restlessness usually represents grossly physical, planning, sensory distraction, mind pulled outward through the six sense doors. As concentration, momentary insight strengthens, coarse distraction subsides, but a subtler condition can appear once the yogi begins perceiving the rapid arising passing of phenomena with some clarity, typically around the state of insight into arising, passing away. When there is just the arising of the object and the falling away of the object, but the object itself is not known directly. The characteristic of the object itself is not known. Just the changing of the object is known. At that stage, the mind, all of these corruptions of insight arise naturally, and it's very different from the coarse initial ones. So at this stage, restlessness is a specific form of over-eager investigation, excitement. Okay, darting at each new phenomenon. Oh, yeah. You know, this is something I've never experienced this before. About the apparent strength of one's own insight rather than general unwise attention to disquiet. So it's it's actually ironic. The mind is at quite a high level of concentration and meditation, but it's excited about the situation. Because of this form of restlessness is intertwined with genuine progress and mistaken for diligence. It's cost among the 10 corruptions of insight, along rapture and tranquility itself, when clung to. Refined experiences that obstruct rather than support further progress if mistaken for signs of attainment. The remedy for restlessness, acting as a corruption of insight, follows the same principle as for ordinary restlessness. There, unhurried noting, just note it. Whatever is present, without adding any evaluation of how the practice is progressing, since that added evaluative movement of the mind itself is the corruption. And thinking about the practice becomes a source of restlessness. Lastly, how does vipassana noting weaken the delusion-rooted chitta associated with restlessness? When restlessness arises and is noted as restless, the wholesome noting chitta displaces the restlessness associated chitta, so you cannot have the two of them at the same moment. I talked about you can only feed one, right? Now I've experienced it whenever there's an unwholesome state of mind during retreat. I always turn into the scientist, into the reporter, because I'm taking data down about that unwholesome state of mind. What is it really like? Because that reporter, that scientist is wholesome, and the wholesome mind, putting attention, putting energy to the reporter, to the scientist, takes energy away from and starves the unwholesome mind, and it naturally goes away. I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm simply feeding the wholesome mind. So over time, yeah.
You know, when you have achieved wholesome mind,
Yeah.
at the point of death, you will go into the Deva realm. It is still within the divine place of existence. But
Okay. If one dies, if one passes away, and the last thought is wholesome, yes, one can be reborn in a Deva realm. You get, because of karma, you get a much nicer realm of existence. However, the Devas are still trapped in samsara. That's why they kept coming to the Buddha saying, how do I, teach us how to get out of this. So a wholesome mind is not enough. If you talk about a wholesome mind, there's levels of punya or merit. The lowest levels, there's a sutta where the Buddha went through the different levels of merit. At the lowest level is offering dana. That's wholesome. That's not going to take you to enlightenment. Much better than the offering dana is keeping precepts, seal, because now you're doing something for yourself. That's wholesome, but it's still not enough. Even more powerful than sila is radiating metta. Now you're developing, cultivating the mind. That, if really developed very high, at a very high level, that metta can take it even past the Deva realm. That can take you to the Brahma realm. Still not enough. The highest, and so what they said is, so the Buddha said is higher than keeping all the precepts is radiating metta for the time it takes to pull a cow's udder. Now, I don't know how long that is. I never milked a cow, but it's not too long. I don't think it's too long. Higher than radiating metta for the amount of time it takes to pull a cow's udder is vipassana insight for the snap of a finger. That's the highest, because that's the only thing that's gonna get you out of samsara. It's gonna escape from samsara. So it's not to say that all that dana and sila and metta are not wholesome minds. They absolutely are. But the penetrative insight, but what's necessary to escape from samsara and not be reborn again, yeah, reborn. A lot of metta, a lot of sila, reborn as a human, maybe even as a deva. A lot of metta, to be reborn as a Brahma. But to not be reborn, need vipassana. That's the highest. So, over time, the yogi observes that restlessness itself arises, stays, and passes. It's impermanent condition, not self. Every time that you see this, the habitual pattern of restlessness is weakened. So when a spotlight of wisdom is shined on restlessness, saying, hey, it only arises for a moment. It's only a momentary thing. It becomes less powerful. That goes back to the contemplating anicca, contemplating anatta aspect of in daily life. The radical approach. Radical. Remember radical. Recognize, accept, depersonalize, investigate, contemplate anicca, contemplate anatta, and let go. Okay. Okay. We'll run over a little bit. Now, next class, I'm about to go on retreat, by the way, for about a month. And so I won't be here for our next class on the 9th. But on the 23rd, I'll be back. So the next class that I'll be here will be the 23rd of August. Okay, so I'll be meditating and hopefully come back glowing with much less restlessness. Much less restlessness.
After retreat, back
Yep.
glowing,
Yes,
glowing,
glowing.
daily life,
Yes.
will your glow be
It depends on when you see me. If you're, in the car on the way back from the retreat,
Yeah.
I'll still have some glow. There'll be an afterglow. But the reality is that 1 month of being on retreat compared to how many decades of
So ultimately, you have to recharge. Otherwise, over a period of time, your glow will disappear.
oh yes, and that's why daily practice is supportive. In daily practice, one is highly unlikely to attain high level insight knowledges, but it's just keeping the engine warm. So that
Just keep it.
Yeah, keep it
maintain that level.
I'm not even saying maintain. It doesn't even
At least
at least have at least keep
still there.
it's still there. At least something's still there.
The residue is still there.
Yeah, the residue is still there. Yeah, some residue. Okay, yes.
As long as we continue our mindfulness, keep on continuing our mindfulness, and we also reduce our restlessness.
It is okay. Go back to radical. I'm talking about daily life, right? Because what's the first thing? Recognize. How do you recognize that that the mind is restless? Mindfulness, right? Needs to be some mindfulness, some basic mindfulness needs to be there to recognize that, hey, the mind right now is restless. That's mindfulness right there. So if there's a habit of hitting the pause button and looking at what's happening right now, that's a habit of mindfulness. Yes. Repeated mindfulness will trigger this. Without mindfulness, this will never be triggered. And restlessness will not be weakened. Needs mindfulness to trigger the radical approach. Okay, if somebody could read the reflections.
Let us